if you want to be successful, you're going to have to throw a lot of time in starting a business. If you don't know what to spend the time on, it's going to become very likely you don't succeed because you're going to find yourself being asked to do more than can be done. So getting it into a container that's actually doable is the challenge for a startup. Thus, it requires huge amounts of productivity. Thus, you need to know what you need to do and be able to say no to almost everything else. I am very good at saying no. I'm a skilled user of the word no. I am at any given time in probably 10 opportunities. My largest failure last year was Library House, certainly, because largest investment both reputationally and unfortunately financially. As it happens, though, I was fortunate enough to have a couple of exits on the other side of the coin. And so as it turned out, it was actually quite a successful year, but unfortunately not for any of the stuff for which I'm best known. And so reputationally, people said, oh my God, Library House went down. Well, that's what you get for using it as a bully pulpit, right? If I hadn't used it to make a mark, then I probably wouldn't have paid the price when I undid it. So I wish it were still around. I love Library House. It was a wonderful company, but not financially. It was a wonderful company because it affected change. You know, I could release papers and this and that. So I regret its passing. It's my own fault. I mean, you're never too old to make new mistakes, you know. And I treated it somewhere between a social enterprise and a business, and therein lay the problem. We did stuff that was not in our own financial interest. We did stuff because we found it interesting, or we wanted to release it, or we wanted to, you know, have an impact. All stuff that really, there's nowhere to do it inside a small business that doesn't have a lot of largesse at its command. And in fact, the challenge, of course, with Library House became that it was, in hindsight being lovely, very dependent, overly dependent on financial customers who perhaps turned off all of their revenue to us in about a 90-day stretch in the fall of '08. Thus, it did not have the resiliency. I mean, one could ask the question quite reasonably, would it have survived had we been 10 times focused? Who knows? I don't have any great lessons from TrueTap because I don't think I would have changed the decisions we made as we made them. It's a very volatile early stage market. It was obsessively focused about doing its business, and the service is out there and growing every day. We had on probably 500 users a day. Possibly a tribute to the team that wrote it that it takes so little attendance. And it's coming alive again. So we had to essentially cut back, unfortunately, dramatically, but now it's been running and now it's about to get new people and investment in it and come back up. If you're going to run startups, you're going to take on this kind of world, you've got to be able to roll with this stuff and be able to find a way to survive until you can grow again. You know, if TrueTap shows anything, it shows that you'd be amazed how dramatic change can be, and you have to take it rather quickly and do it openly so that everyone remains friends. And then as the opportunities in the economy come back and it matures, assuming you did it right enough, you're still around to play, which is unfortunately is where TrueTap is now. So we'll actually be announcing something in 6 or 8 weeks. So, you know, you never say die when you're starting business. I guess a good metaphor would be a sports team, a football team. A football team goes out and plays a game every Sunday. And some it wins and some it loses. At the end of the game on a Sunday evening, if Man United has lost, the team is not a failure. Well, some people think it is, but it's not actually. What it is, it's a team that lost. And what everyone's very cognizant of is that the team's going to go out and play a game again the following week. People have to get their heads around that when you're starting a business, you're going to get knocked back endlessly. And therefore, and potentially, you'll close the business and have to walk away from it. If you're an entrepreneur, chances are you'll start a new one. And historically, if you look at people who've succeeded very dramatically, certainly better than I have, many, if not most of them, have had to take 2 or 3 swings at bat before they've been very successful. Not everyone. Some people have succeeded right out the door, and God bless them. And so I think that if people get the view that starting a business ends at the end of the first business, successful or unsuccessful, that's a problem because frequently it's a learning experience, the first one. Certainly was for me. Now, as it happens, my first one was modestly successful, but certainly more than enough to provide the seed capital for my second business, which proved to be very successful. So I had a pretty gentle learning curve compared to some people who've had some horrific learning curves. But it's equally true as an angel investor. I mean, I sort of straddle a fence these days. I both start businesses and I invest in other people's. If an angel investor took the view that failure was bad, then they would never get out of bed in the morning, because you're lucky to have 1 in 10 return. That means 90% of the time you hear bad news. Well, let's see, how many working days you have in a year? 90% of them are bad news days as an angel investor. You live for those days when the 10% call, right? And they say things like, yes, we've doubled in size again since we last spoke to you. And you think to yourself, cool. Because they have to carry the weight, right, for the 90% that fell. So once again, I think that the question of what does the word failure mean? To me, failure is a conclusion, right? Therefore, it's at the end. Well, I'm not dead yet. And so I'll let you know after I'm dead whether I'm a success or a failure. But certainly, I no longer bet my fortune. So, I mean, I'll wake up in the morning rich and I'll go to bed rich, though less rich some years than others. So I don't view the question of one or another high-risk startup defining anything. And I think that people have to kind of get their head around that, because else we're not going to have successful entrepreneurs. I've now taught around 1,100 people in 2008, of which slightly less than half were people who had already started a business. Slightly more than half desired to. And of the ones who started a business, it is, of course, what they're doing is they're taking a business that's already in play and they're applying the same questions to it, not because they want to know how to start it, but they want to know, did they start it right? And therefore now, what do they have to change? And having cast a light on their own activities, how ugly does it look? Or how beautiful, perhaps. This is where you find out the money's in the exhaust, right? Because in going through the questions that I ask, the first one being around this, actually. Are you making money in the right place? Though I don't ask it that way. In fact, I think the title question is, what's the benefit? But from that follows 2 hours of interrogation. So you'd be amazed what you can hide underneath that. One could apply it to see my pitch. I'm not trying to put you on the spot since the camera's focused on me, but were I to entertain myself at your expense, I would say, I'd ask you the question, what is the benefit to your customer? And insist that I then understand from that, how do you know? And if that's the benefit, how have you described it such that they get it? And how do you know that you're delivering it? And how much is it worth to them? And how do you know that? And how are you going to make money off of that? And does it sustain all the effort to deliver that benefit? And thus we get a business model question out of it. And in particular, in businesses like yours, and many of the ones I build, web-based services, which is what ultimately we're doing, we have such freedom to change our model. We have almost an obligation to ask this question harder than anyone else, because we can do more about it. If you're building semiconductors, there's a bit of cash in all the stuff you've done. It's not going to be easy once you've taped out your semiconductor to say, oops, I should have done it differently. But you and I can, on a moment's notice, change almost the entire business. Thus, the first questions, where is the money, essentially? What's the benefit? Same question, becomes more important.